and then Western 3 years in a row. What's happening? Where are you at in the season right now? Is it?
How do you think? Good to go.
Thank you.
Good to go.
Okay, everybody, let's call the meeting to order. Just before we get started, anybody who's online, if you could just double check, triple check that you're muted, because we could hear some background noise a couple seconds ago. So just triple check if you're listening that you're muted. Okay, so call the meeting to order. It is now 3:16 p.m. As I am typically prone to do, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we jump to substantive portions of the agenda. First thing is every year, actually one of my absolute favorite events to attend is the Louis Corey Awards that take place here at the London Police Service. This was a particularly special year in the sense that we don't normally host it down in the is it one of the training rooms, Chief? And this year, because of increased demand and just people love coming out to this celebration for understandable reasons, we actually hosted it at RBC Place. It was incredibly well attended, and if you're ever looking for an inspirational evening, find your way out to the Louis Corey Awards, which recognizes Louis Corey, who was the first ever Black police officer that in the London Police Service's history, and this award is named after him. His family attends. It is honestly a fantastic evening. So thank you to the chief, to the deputies, everybody that played an important role in making that the successful event that it is every single year. Little personal thing, just because it's also Ramadan. So to all of our Muslim London Police Service members, both civilian and sworn, and everybody else, happy Ramadan. We got 4 hours and 32 minutes until you can eat. So
That's counting.
who's counting, right? Yeah, absolutely. So good luck. Okay, and with that, I'm going to look to the board for any disclosures of interest. Any members have any disclosures, conflicts, or anything of the like that they need to disclose? If so, please do so right now. Okay, seeing none. Do any members have any new business that they want to introduce or add to the agenda? If so, now the opportunity. Seeing none. In your package, you have the minutes from the February 14th, 2024 public meeting. I assume you've had an opportunity to review it. Are there any revisions, deletions, amendments?
Moved.
Thank you. Moved by member Goss, seconded by member Branscombe. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Deputy Chief Bastine for the first report. So here we're looking at the 2023 Joint Forces Operations Report. The JFO or JFO?
Chair, through you, I believe it's JF.
Okay, that's
done. That's how I pronounce it. Sorry. Chair, through you. So this is the 2023 Joint Forces Operations Report submitted in accordance with LPSB policy and adequacy standards guidelines. Joint Forces Operations essentially encompass somewhat self-explanatory. They're partnerships between members of the London Police Service and other law enforcement partners. Typically, majority of these you see in this report are partnerships with the OPP, some with the RCMP as well. There's they may involve CBSA, the Canadian Border Services. These joint force operations typically focus on higher level organized criminal activity, typically crossing multiple jurisdictions. So they range, as you can see in the report, from asset forfeiture, guns and gangs enforcement, weapons enforcement, biker enforcement. There's a common theme there, of course. Enforcement, some of them are also intelligence based. We have partnerships with Criminal Intelligence Services of Ontario, Provincial Anti-Terrorism Section, which is primarily an intelligence gathering entity. So these, in addition to really enhancing our capacity to deliver community safety for the City of London, Also, these JFOs enable us to, at an individual level, enable officers to develop their skills and their professional development by learning from other jurisdictions, other officers about the work. So there's a range and some variety. And what they do is these officers bring back those skills to the service. And typically the secondments are anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So the report does contain, for each of the JFOs, to contain some information about some successes and investigations which has been involved over the year. However, subject to questions, that's the report for this.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Justine. Members, are there any questions for Deputy Chief with regards to the report? Member Stevenson.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I did have a question on number 4, the provincial repeat offender parole enforcement unit. It talks about that in 2023, the West Region rope team, and I just wondered what region that was. And that it looked like almost half of the individuals were within London. So I was just curious what that region was for us to have.
So we are in the West Region. It extends as far southwest to Windsor. The eastern boundary escapes me. However, it's essentially, I want to say, just east of Waterloo. I may be mistaken there. However, it's the southwestern Ontario region. Referred to as the West, and really there are a large number of them of people there who are in the city of London.
Is there anything around that you want to share? Like, is that surprising, or is that what you expected?
I think here through you, I think this is it's not unexpected. I think we're the largest cities in the West region. We think of the number of violent offenses taking place, or we've seen in the city. A lot of the people that rope will end up seeking, or it draws their attention back to the city to find them. It's not just offenders who commit new criminal offenses. It's also, I think, as the report indicates, parolees, people who are breaching conditions, and ultimately those who pose highest risk to safety.
Yep, please go ahead.
Or actually, it was more a comment that number 6 under the provincial records enforcement unit that all of the firearms that were seized when they were traced, they all originated back to the United States. So it was reassuring to see that it's not Canadian owned weapons here, that they were all from the US. It was just a comment to highlight that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Deputy Justine with regards to the report?
I'm going to move the seat, Chair.
Thank you. That's moved by Member Goss and seconded by Member Branscombe. You want to pose to receipt of the JFO report? Seeing none, that is carried. Deputy Chief Justine, get used to it. We're going to come to you a few times in a row here. So over to you for the 2023 Internal Task Force's Adequacy Standards Report.
Thank you, Chair. For you, this one pertains to what we call task forces, which are defined essentially as planned operation established to address a certain criminal activity. You'll see that this report includes events that don't necessarily on the face constitute criminal activity. So in the previous 2 years, we reported upon events, protests, large-scale events that were taxing respective resources, required a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and a targeted, deliberate approach to addressing them to mitigate risks to public safety, specifically St. Patrick's Day, New Year's Eve, and homecoming. So those have been included. The statistics you see in that report around enforcement on the 3rd page of the report contain not just task forces targeting activity, but also these public safety, public disorder projects. So you see a couple of the higher cost ones that impacted the city are highlighted in the report. The first being homecoming, the second being Project Safe. Homecoming is a 3-day deployment first in the fall, September, which we deploy a large number of resources from the City of London, our public order unit members, and other supporting units, as well. See, over the years, we've identified the need to bring in extra resources from outside other police services to assist us. Project Safe, of course, was the investigation into drug or firearm trafficking conducted throughout the course of April, May, and June of last year, resulted in tremendous results. Seizure of over 20 handguns, arrested and charged, laid against over 70 individuals and centers. So, those stats, the report is before you, subject to any questions from the board. That is the report for board's receipt.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Bastine. We're gonna get started here with Member Goss, with some questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you to Deputy Bastine. In 2023, Student Homecoming Project in September to promote public safety and rest parties incurred a cost of $311,076. So is that just the one day, just homecoming? Like, is it the weekend? Can you give me a bit more of a breakdown on that number?
It's Chair, through you, it's the one event, but it's multiple days. It's 3 days. Project Homecoming ran between September 22nd and the 24th for 2023.
And has Western University, I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong, have they contributed towards this cost in previous years?
The Chair, yes, through you, the Western has contributed to the City of London. I believe the amount was $100,000, 75,000 of which was then directed to backfilling the police service to go to offset the costs associated with homecoming. Those that took place in 2023 as well as 2022.
And so, thank you. So are we aware, will that be continuing moving forward with Western as well? Have they made a commitment to either LPS or to the City of London?
Chair, through you, I believe we do have that commitment from Western in a letter to, I believe, to the city, which we have received as well. Essentially pledging to cover that cost of $100,000. Again, I believe it's to the city, so what that will be for the police service will depend on what the city sends over, but that commitment has been made.
Perfect. And if you'll indulge, Chair,
Please go ahead.
thank you. So, well, thank you to Western for that and for agreeing to continue contributing towards these costs. I guess my last question is kind of a two-parter. One, I believe in previous reports to the board, you mentioned that we bring in other public order teams, for lack of a better term, from different police services outside of London. And there's kind of a trade back and forth. So when there's a homecoming in another city or another public order event, we send our team. So is this, just to confirm, is this a combination of hard costs and in-kind costs, or is it 311,000 all hard costs?
Chair, through you, that does include some soft costs. So there is in 2023 there was Windsor Police, Hamilton Police, York Regional Police Service who provided assistance to us. In the case of Windsor Police, there was a reciprocal arrangement made, which saw some Windsor Police Service members attending here to assist, and then in return saw us sending public order instructors to Windsor to assist them with the development of their team. They didn't at the time have a team. With respect to Hamilton Police, something similar. I don't think it was homecoming. I think it was an exchange. Hamilton Police Service public order unit attended our city in exchange for us assisting them with, I believe it was Canada Day or another event. So there was no money exchange with respect to Hamilton Police and Canada Police. Those were in-kind costs. So there is about $38,000 of that $311,000, which represents in-kind costs that we incurred by sending our members to assist them for their event.
Perfect. And the second part of my question, this is where I'll end here, is what work is being done to proactively work with the university and other other organizations that have large gatherings to kind of decrease these costs. $311,000 for a few days, that's a lot of money. And that's a lot of resources that are being deployed into an area that also we need to be cognizant of the needs around the city as well. So I guess is there work through the core team? Is there work through, senior command to different leadership of different organizations? What's being done to try to bring this down?
Chair, through you, we have, and we do engage regularly with all the partners. So the City of London, EMS, the university, of course, neighborhood associations, the neighborhood itself. Specifically, the core unit, as you know, was redeployed. We have a small handful of members who are back attached to a core unit. But we also have a planning unit consisting of Officer whose job is to conduct put these plans together, liaise with people. We do have senior command as needed throughout at the various levels to ensure that there's collaboration and communication going forward in advance, try to mitigate not only the safety risk, but like to your point, the costs involved.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Goss asked 3 of my questions. Thanks. Yeah. So,
I can move.
no,
Additional questions.
so just, so chair doesn't typically ask questions, number one, and we usually wait to the end to ask our questions, so just, we also have some excellent questions there, so thank you. So the one question I will ask, if that's okay, is that it's completely unrelated, references a tow truck project in there, and there was some variation in the numbers in the chart there. It was page 3 of the report. It said that the decrease in 2023 from 0.2 for provincial offense notices was due to the tow truck enforcement project. It just caught my eye. I'm just curious what that is.
Right. So, Chair, through you. Right. So I think what that relates to is the fact that you see in 2022, you see number of provincial offense notices in particular is quite high relative to sort of 2021. And then back in 2023, we saw a drop.
Yeah.
So that highlights the fact that the towing enforcement project was heavy on issuing enforcement notices or offense notices. And that's reflected. So that drop, that's to account for that.
So it sounds like it was a dedicated kind of enforcement type thing against tow truck drivers.
It was. I don't have the specifics of
Oh, that's fine.
back in 2022 project, but it was I believe it was a benefit here conducted to target various issues with tow truck operators.
Perfect. Sure. Thank you. So there's any other questions? I'll look for a motion to receive for informational purposes, the Deputy Chief's 2023 Internal Task Force Adequacy Standards Report. I'm gonna go to member Stevenson, seconded by member Raymond here. All right. I show too much love to this side of it. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Deputy Chief Bastine, agenda item number 7, 2023 mandatory annual report with regards to missing persons. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, this report with the accompanying report submitted by Staff Sergeant Elliott hopefully explains things to the board's liking. The Missing Persons Act into effect in 2019, which filled a gap that existed prior to that, which cases where a person was missing might be at serious risk of harm, but there's no evidence of criminality. Police were quite limited with respect to what they could do. If you have a missing persons case where criminality is suspected, or where you have grounds to believe an offense has occurred, you have a number of tools at your disposal. For example, production orders, search warrants, those sort of things to gather evidence about where the missing person might be. This act filled the gap by providing police with the ability to demand or order, direct that certain entities provide the police with information or records about the missing person, where there's this belief that those records exist, and where there's a belief that the missing person to whom they relate is being in imminent danger. or in adversity themselves. And we're waiting waiting for those records, but through other means would could result in their loss or destruction. So the report that is submitted to the ministry in the Form 7, which is attached to Staff Sergeant Elliott's report, shows that there were 18 urgent demands made on the basis of that act in relation to 11 different missing person cases throughout the year. So of those 11, there were several that had more than one urgent demand made for information. So we can questions or this. No, report fits received.
Thank you. Any questions? Raymond.
Deputy Chief, there was 18 urgent demands out of 822 missing person investigations. That strikes me as rather low. Can you kind of give me a perspective on that?
Sure, Chair, through you, the number probably related to, sometimes we have other information at our disposal. Sometimes we have video evidence. We have, there might be witness evidence or something, or other traces, other evidence that leads us to locating or to starting a search for a missing person. This is really cases where we have nothing to go on and maybe looking for, we may be looking for evidence that a person used a health card in another city. So they're sort of extraordinary cases. Some of them relate to cell phone use, of course, social media use, but a lot of them do relate to medical records. So in the vast majority of those total missing person occurrences throughout the year involve cases where, although they're going missing or being a missing person can often put a person in real danger or at risk for victimization, criminality, etc. A lot of them really they get reported missing at 3 o'clock. Yeah, 4:30 they're recorded. They come back. Sometimes they're from a family home, other times they're from a group home or other environments such as that. But I don't have anything more than that. Just generally speaking, though, these would relate to the cases where there's really nothing to go on, and we need a place to start.
Other questions? I got a question from the guy who says he doesn't ask the question. So how do we determine, so when an officer goes and makes a request on an urgent basis, it's obviously left to the subjective or the objective determination by that officer as to whether it meets the criteria or not, right? So that's step one. Step two is we then collect all the data, we submit it to the ministry, which is right part of that kind of audit process, if you will, right? I guess my question is, what recourse, if any, are you aware of if somebody receives a request for an urgent piece of information, but then determines, doesn't think it is urgent, like, well, go get a search warrant, go do that, right? They have to produce it. What recourse does that person have if they dispute or disagree with the urgent nature of the request? Or is there a dispute mechanism?
Through you, I don't know the answer to that question. Okay. There may be, however, it is. I
don't need the answer right now. Just maybe you can report back. It doesn't have to even come back to the board, but I'd like to know, and I can maybe share it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Can I get a motion that the board accepts for informational purposes, the 2023 mandatory annual report related to missing persons and posts it to the LPS website and forwards it to Solicitor General Prisoner's Office, which is actually a legislative requirement that we have to do. So moved by Vice Chair Walker, seconded by Member Goss. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. All right, item number 8, 2023 fourth quarter business plan progress report. Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair, through you. This report just highlights or really closes off the last business plan of the board. So from 2019 to 2023, In the three priorities within that plan, community safety, community well-being, and organizational capacity. In summary, this is really no major differences from the last Q3 report that was provided as we work towards our new strategic plan and building those deliverables within that plan. I can say out of the 197 deliverables that were in the old strategic plan or the previous strategic plan, we completed 137 of those. 34 we deferred or are building into the new strategic plan. And 26 we stopped or paused as they had no longer relevancy in the new direction of where we're going. So in short, this is just for the board's information and kind of close this report off, and we continue to build and expand on deliverables of our current plan to make sure they're aligned with, of course, the new direction, embedded metrics within our budget, reporting process, and the chief's vision. Report for you is.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief McIntyre. I'm looking over to Member Branscombe.
For you, Jim. Thanks, Deputy. I guess, the ones that aren't completed or in process, are they then added to the new business plan as well, in addition to what we've already accepted? Are they still relevant to the new plan? I guess that's the question.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So we look at each of those and say, okay, is this relevant to the direction that the board has for the new strategic plan and to the tree's priorities? If so, we embed them in as a deliverable. If not, we pause them and set them aside.
And the second question is, there was a great deal of commitment, I guess, by the board and the chief to council about the metrics. So are you going to work with the board and the councilors here to develop a much more, I guess, in-depth? I mean, this is good information, but for me, this isn't the metrics that we have promised to deliver to the community. So I guess, I know this is just the straggler from last business plan, but going forward, how are we going to develop the very strong metrics that we've committed to delivering to the community?
Yeah, no, excellent question. And the proper home for those metrics is in the business plan. It is in the strategic plan because that's what we report back on. So you want any major strategic direction or initiative to be embedded in the strategic plan. And we are working on that data set right now. Under, of course, our people, our work, our community was the new strategic plan. We know that the budget was highlighted on making the city safer now. What are those metrics that we are going to report out on? And let's get them in the business plan, in the strategic plan, so that they're there and no one loses track of them. So that work is ongoing right now as we hone what that looks like to ensure we can deliver on.
So when will we see that to give you some opinions about whether we think it's enough or not?
That we're building that right now. So within either the next board meeting, at the very latest, the next, but we're building in all of those to be able to present to the board line by line to make sure you're happy with that before we embark on the new plan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Walton.
Just wanted to follow up on that, actually. So this is the conclusion, which I understand. I always think it's good to go out with a bang, but I don't find that here. I find it's kind of going out with a trickle. And so I was disappointed in this. Give you an example, crime prevention, there are no metrics. Human trafficking awareness campaign was successful. So what does that mean? How successful? How did you determine the success? It talks about the principles of crime prevention through environmental design were expanded through the community initiatives and training sessions. The risk terrain model pilot project helped to identify high risk areas. So again, I'm like, yeah, but what does it mean? What are the numbers associated with it? And so as I go through the entire community safety plan, it's the same. There's no specificity. Yeah. And I'm just, so I'm not asking you to go back, but I just really feel moving forward, it's great if you actually make it cohesive and available to the public. So for instance, the public reading this really wouldn't walk away with any information. And I find that's disappointing. And so as you move forward, I hope that the investment made at the beginning is also equally invested in at the end. Because I don't think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, your time.
Member Goss.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, McIntyre. So we're at 69% complete, so I think we all agree that, you know, everyone would like it much higher, there's no question, but I think some context here is important. So, through you, Chair, I just was wondering if you could maybe provide why the number is where it is. Specifically, like, I know that, like, there's some projects, like, for instance, traffic management, enforcement, safety. There's 2 deferred projects. That's a real concern in our community right now. I noticed that there were a couple of projects that were deferred for the response to victims of vulnerable and racialized persons and groups. There's 2 projects deferred there. So there's not a ton of context on that. So I'm just wondering if maybe you could provide a bit more. And obviously, I know there's a pandemic, there's a whole bunch of different things, but it would just, I think, help it fill in some gaps.
Sure, most certainly through you, Chair. So the public has heard, I think, nonstop at our capacity to deliver resources in the community was incredibly flawed and compromised. That was compounded by the pandemic and really highlighted the fact that we run so incredibly lean, or had in the past, and we have a light now at the end of the tunnel to correct that, but had in the past run incredibly lean. When COVID happened, we were at a compressed state. There was no more room to try to run other initiatives, to try to do things that were over and beyond core functions, core policing mandate. Every resource, everything shifted to trying to answer calls on the street. Very simply stated, we collapsed the core unit. We pulled officers out of the school system as that project was paused. We did everything we could to move resources to just be able to respond. The public is well versed on our response times and the issues with response times. We have seen nothing but, extraordinary increases in service complaints. So when that happens, or other initiatives or other proactive preventative initiatives that unfortunately get compromised. But if you stand back and look at that, where do the efforts need to be? They need to be in prevention and proactive work, because, it's like the bucket analogy. You have a tap overflowing a bucket. Well, what do? You either get a bigger bucket, put more people on the road, or you find ways to shut off the tap overflowing the bucket. And in this case, and what we've presented in the chief's priorities, is to do both of those at the exact same time. You have to be in a preventative space, or we will never keep up. And this business plan, on top of then COVID at a compressed state, highlighted that we had bit off more than we could chew, and we couldn't accomplish everything that was set out. So now it's about, okay, where are we going? And what is now the new direction? And how are we going to accomplish that? What will be the embedded measures to ensure success and to be transparent to the community and really place our people in an evidence-based model, doing the best we can with the resources we have, and then grow that model as we add resources to the organization. So this isn't where we want to be. You highlighted, you bring out exactly, it is not with a bang. There's nothing about this that is a bang. This is just really a reflection of current state, but then a baseline of now where we get to go. So it is kind of all of that encompassed in kind of one.
Supplementary.
Yep.
Through you, Chair. So moving forward into our new strategic plan that's now on the table and in place, are you confident that with the new historic investment that's been made by City Council, with the new service delivery model that is being proposed, that we are going to be able to achieve much higher in terms of the completion rate, in terms of the service, in terms of this service, delivering the service that the community expects and demands because of that investment? Because I want to see like this in the high 90s, right? If not 100, but which I'm realistic. But is there anything that you can foresee right now where we're not going to do much better in the current strategic plan?
I think we can only go up. Truthfully, when one thing, that is really exciting is just the addition of special constables. So look at what 20 people, the visibility of 20 special constables will do right away on the road. We are hiring those people as we speak. They will be in training in June. There are exciting things as we, moving people to the college, expanded our capacity. We'll get those people back and we'll train them. We'll embed new technology, but at the exact same time, we look at how do we use the resource we have in the most effective manner? How do we deploy our people in the spots of high harm and at hot spots? Who are the people that in the city that are creating, or responsible rather, for the largest volume of crime? Let's put resources at those people. So let's be efficient at the exact same time, moving all of the other initiatives that are well laid out in the budget. And then let's track the metrics, the heck out of those metrics, and see what we do. So I have the utmost confidence that we will not sit at baseline, that we can only go up.
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Thank you. Any further questions for Deputy Chief? Yep, that's all.
Deputy Chief, I'm just gonna follow up on Member Goss's kind of questioning there. Looking to the specifically at community safety. And what kind of really jumped out at me under emergency response and public order maintenance, on 17 deliverables, only 5 were completed. So now we've got 7 in progress, 5 deferred. And then from my understanding from previous questions, those are going to be added now to the next 4-year strategic plan. First of all, am I correct in that assumption, or are they duplicated, or are they?
Through you, Chair. So some will get paused if they don't have relevance with the key priorities that we are going to advance from now. If they go in, I don't think of it as duplicate, think of them as revisions, as augmented to appropriately reflect the hierarchy, the goals that were established by the board in the new plan. So we might revision them. We might give them a bit of a tweak so that they are embedded and not stop them completely. But now that you know what you know, things change. So those deliverables are put in well into 2018. We start to map the course for that business plan. Well, things change. Our environment has changed. The community's drastically changed. So are they duplicate? Are they add-ons? Well, we're actually building them right now. So the board's plan establishes the 3 big umbrellas, and then, we call them the little bullet points, those little deliverables. Now we will embed how are we doing that? So some will include some of these that we haven't got to. Others will be augmented. Others will be stopped completely.
Yes.
Yeah, so my understanding is there's no higher priority on these items that are deferred or in progress. They just kind of get re-evaluated into the mix. Okay, so I'll just say this. Yes, there's been unprecedented investment from council and this city in seeing progress here. Improvement is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for substantial improvement. If it comes back at, or what, 65% or whatever, and we go, oh, we got 75% next year, that or at the end of our 4 years, that's not where I intend to go in this. And I want to make that very clear from my perspective as a board member that came up with this budget, and then as a counselor, obviously that supported at council. So I just,
Absolutely.
I look forward
Well taken.
I look forward to seeing this as we go through the next years. It seems substantial improvement on progress.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Morgan.
Yeah, so I'll be brief. I would say that I'm long, so I apologize. I just want to pick up on a couple of comments that colleagues have made. They combine, I think, the thoughts of Member Branscombe and Member Goss. I think that the budget process outlined kind of a shifting of the way that we do business, both in the operational plan as well as in the way that we're going to report on these sorts of things. And I feel by just looking at even the metrics that were provided in the business cases, which are at a much more granular level than even what we've envisioned in previous strategic plans, that we're moving towards metrics that feel more based on impacts than maybe checking off, yes, we completed X number of initiatives in this space, but did it actually change the impacts on the lives of Londoners, the safety of the city, the types of things that we know we can measure. And so to Member Branscome's comments about, when we're going to see that, I think that's a really critical piece of the public being able to understand how their investment is being spent moving forward, but more importantly, the impacts that investment is starting to create and the driving of the metrics and the numbers that actually have an impact on people's lives and on the actual level of safety and security within the city. So, I think for me, looking at this report, it's a nice wrap up, but it's not the way that we've decided as a board or an administration to do business in the future. And so I envision a whole different way of both, achieving the strategic plan's goals, but also measuring and reporting out on those investments in a way that is linked much more to impacts than it is on did we achieve or check off the initiatives that we planned? Because if we're not achieving the impacts, then I think we're going to change the initiative. So we're going to change what we're doing. It's all about, achieving the actual goals here, not just ensuring that we've checked all the boxes. And that's not a criticism of this organization. There are many organizations who have taken that shift from we've done the things in the strategic plan, great job, to we're measuring the impacts and we're going to achieve those impacts, even if we have to adjust our strategic plan and our operations moving forward. And I know that's a commitment that the chief and the command team has made, the board has made, and I think is an expectation of the public, given the budget. So I'm pretty excited about the future. I'm very interested in talking about the metrics discussion and how we're going to measure and report out on this, because I think we've set that expectation for the public. This is what they're going to see, and this is what they can expect. And I think it's going to be, much more transparent and more easily understood in the future than it has been in the past, which makes me think, yes, I'm happy to approve this report, but I'm very excited about the next iteration of what comes in the future.
Thank you, Member Morgan. Chief.
Sure, excuse me, and through you, just for comment, I will say that when we did the strategic plan and when we did the new multi-year budget, that was with a different lens. We realigned the priorities of the organization with the goal of ensuring that the city is safe as quickly as possible. So safe now. We looked at what we need to do internally as an organization, modernize the organization. There's a lot of work to do. But once we do that, and as we put in that work, the community will see results. And with metrics, as we finalize what these metrics look like, and we are very close to doing that for the board's awareness. I think the board will be very happy with the metrics and as we work with the mayor. I'm very confident that the metrics will not produce, some of the comments that were made, what's this mean? You'll actually know why the metrics are there, the community will see it. And it's for our people too. Very confident I have the right leaders in this organization. I have fantastic members in this organization that are all working together. And I can assure this board that you will see results and tangible results.
Any further questions? Thank you. So, if the board receives for informational purposes the 2023 fourth quarter business plan progress report, moved by Member Branscombe, seconded by Member Ross. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Agenda item number 9 is the sexual assault and child abuse section and the victim advocate case review program. I know Deputy Chief Baskine will be you and you have your team members here that will be providing a presentation, but over you.
Mr. Chair, for you, this report is submitted in response to motion by the board for additional information that have submitted from the sexual assault section and criminal investigation division come to tolerance and detail the board is seeking to have following the last meeting or following the report previously submitted. So the report you have before you does include a lot of the content. I know that Detective Inspector Krigsman and Detective Sergeant Dan will be sharing with you, so I'm not going to go into that at this point. The report is ultimately submitted for the board's receipt. However, at this point, I'll introduce my colleagues here. Detective Inspector Alex Krigsman is the officer in charge of the investigative support branch for criminal investigation division, and he has with Detective Sergeant Catherine Dan, who's in charge of the sexual assault and child abuse section. I'd like them up to share the information with you. Those who are frequent or regular viewers of this program, is Detective Inspector Krigsman from my previous
Back by popular demand.
Yeah.
I guess so. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Deputy, and it's great to be back. Chair and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity given to us this afternoon to provide you with some information about our sexual assault and child abuse section, and also about the work that they do, and also about the Violence Against Women Advocate Case Review Program. With me is Detective Sergeant Catherine Dan. Catherine is the officer in charge of our sexual assault and child abuse section, and she has been so since August 2021. Prior to that, she was a detective with the section, and she also has additional extensive experience with the investigation of major cases, including homicides, sexual assaults, attempt homicides, and also experience with projects. From her past experience and her assignments to major crime and to our major case management support unit. So I'm going to turn things over to Catherine to present to you. So step behind me.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to the board for inviting me to speak here today. I have a presentation that I'll go through with you that I hope answers most of your questions, and then obviously we'll answer any questions you have afterwards. So these are the topics we're going to cover today, overview of our section, as well as some stats and explanation about the clearance codes that we use, as well as some information about the Victim Advocate Case Review Program and some new initiatives that we have implemented over the last couple of years. There's two things that I'll mention at the start of my presentation. I'm going to use the term victim throughout the presentation. I understand that some victims of sexual violence prefer the term survivor, but victim is kind of police terminology, so that's what I'll be using. I also may refer to the victim as she or her throughout the presentation because the majority of the victims we see are women and girls, but I'm fully aware that males and other genders are victims of sexual assault. So this is information about our section. Our current complement as of March this year is 1 detective sergeant, which is myself, 5 detectives, and 6 detective constables. So the mandate or the cases that we're responsible for are the majority of sexual assault investigations and all child abuse investigations, which would include physical and sexual abuse of children, as well as allegations of neglect. And we provide support to other areas of the police service in relation to physical and emotional abuse of older persons and do assume control of some of those investigations as well. This is a list of the courses that our team receives when they come to the section, starting with criminal investigators training, major case management, sexual assault investigation, all delivered by the Ontario Police College. Additionally, investigating offenses against children, investigations involving older adults, investigative phase interviewing, and the search warrant course. On top of those courses, we're also members of different associations, committees, councils that deliver training throughout the year. So there's a list of some of the partners that we are connected with that deliver training throughout the year. We have to comply with the Ontario Major Case Management System. So this system was created after the review of the Paul Bernardo investigation. In short, it's just a standardized approach to investigating these types of offenses that every police service across the province has to comply with. So sexual assaults and attempted sexual assaults are a criteria offense for major case management. We are mandated to use a specific software where we enter all the data related to our cases. And that is just to share information with other police services so that if an offender commits an offense, say in Toronto, and also committed an offense in London, both services would become aware that they have committed an offense in both locations. These statistics are all of the sexual assaults reported to the London Police per year. So as you're probably aware, these statistics also include cases that didn't occur in those years. Many of our cases are historical. So those would be included in these statistics. We have about 100 or more cases per year that didn't occur in the year that they were reported. Some of the statistics may be different than what appeared on previous board reports. And that's simply because many of our investigations are still under investigation and the coding may change by the time the investigation is concluded.
The incident clearance status. So we do not establish clearance statuses. They're actually created by the Uniform Crime Reporting Survey Manual. And you'll see two definitions that will be throughout the clearance status explanations. So a victim is the target of a violent or aggressive action and should not be confused with a complainant, which is the target of a non-violent incident. And then you'll also see the acronym CSC, and that refers to charged, suspect, chargeable. And that is a person who's been identified as an accused person in an incident and against whom a charge may be laid in connection with that incident. So the first clearance status is fairly basic charges. So suspect's been identified and a criminal charge is laid or recommended to be laid against the individual. Unfounded. Unfounded is a clearance code that is used when we have evidence to show that the offense reported did not occur or was not attempted. Victim declines to proceed, and victim requests that no further action is taken. So there's various parts of this. The victim doesn't want to actively participate in the investigation, or they request that no further action is taken. So why do victims decline to proceed? I can say this is different for every victim that we deal with. Justice looks different to all victims. I think people need to understand that when some victims come in and provide a statement to police, that may be the only time they've ever told anyone about what happened to them. And they just want to tell us what happened, be believed, understand that what happened to them was not okay, and they want to just pause. So that is often what occurs. We all know that the court process can be traumatizing and is quite lengthy. You're looking at, between a year and 2 years before the case goes to trial. And, that gives a victim a lot of anxiety to know that they have to wait for that court date for that length of time. I can't count the number of times I've heard from a victim that they're reporting to protect other women. They want the police to know what happened, and they want the offender to know that they've reported to the police, but they're not interested in proceeding before the courts. Some victims need more time to heal and build strength. We do have many victims call back later after they receive counseling and support, and they feel stronger and ready to proceed at that time. One benefit in Canada is that we have no statute of limitations. So we have laid charges in relation to offenses that occurred in the 1980s, 1990s, 1970s. So that's why it's important that we want to wait until the victim is ready to move forward before we proceed with the charge. Sexual assault cases are unique in that generally there are only two people present for the offense, the accused and the victim. And then, of course, during the court process, the accused has the right not to testify. So you can understand the importance of the victim's statement. And if they are not a willing participant in the court process, then there's a lack of evidence to present, basically, because often, as I said, there are only two people present for the crime. Insufficient evidence. When there's insufficient or conflicting evidence for the police service to substantiate laying a charge or recommending a charge. So I want to make it clear that this coding is not used because we do not believe the victim or we do not think the offense took place. We just haven't met the threshold to proceed with a charge. So as I just said, the threshold of reasonable and probable grounds has not been met. And there are several things that impact that we kind of commonly see. One is a third-party caller. So the victim may disclose to a friend, and then the friend calls the police. The victim never wanted police involved in the first place, but it is important that we document that current occurrence as a sexual assault, because if that victim calls back 10 years later and says, my friend called on my behalf 10 years ago, we can find that report, and it just adds to the truthfulness of the victim's statement, which is a benefit for her. Our cases involving older adults, the child cases don't fall under the mandate of the committee, but we do have resident-on-resident sexual assaults occur at long-term care homes. And we can't proceed with the investigation because, for instance, the victim and the suspect both don't have the capacity to remember what happened or understand what happened at the time, but it's still reported as a sexual assault because that offense did happen. No formal statement from the victim. So as I said, sometimes we have a third-party caller. The victim is not interested in speaking to us. My team still does attempt to have a conversation with the victim to offer supports and provide some referrals to victim services. But without that formal statement, there's really not much we can go on. And we do have cases, of course, where the suspect cannot be identified. So an example of that would be, you know, a woman's walking in a park and the suspect drives by on a bike and smacks her on the buttocks. So that is a sexual assault, but because the victim didn't get a good look at the person or something like that, we just don't have enough to identify the suspect. So that would be considered insufficient evidence to proceed. And this one's fairly self-explanatory. The cases that are still under investigation that we're actively working on. So there are other categories that we sometimes use. Departmental discretion is not one we use often in our sexual assault cases because we do not warn or caution anyone for sexual assault. Diversionary program we rarely use as well because sexual assault is such a serious offense. For our child cases, sometimes we do have suspects that are under the age of 12 and cannot be prosecuted. And then we have had cases as well where the suspect dies before we lay a charge. I'll just go into a brief history of the Violence Against Women Advocate Case Review Program. In 2017, the chief at the time launched a review to analyze any sexual assault investigation that was quoted as unfounded between 2010 and 2016. In September of 2017, we issued a report that outlined the results of the unfounded review, and included in that report was a recommendation to create an external advisory committee informed by the Philadelphia model. In March of 2018, an MOU was signed by members of the newly established committee, and I believe they started reviewing cases near the end of 2018. The purpose and scope of the program, as laid out in the MOU, is to ensure the best practice responses to sexual assault reports, improve the effectiveness of the investigative process, assist with the apprehension of offenders, and provide the proper level of service and respect to sexual assault complainants and enhance their trust in the process, provide open communication and cooperation between LPS and advocate agencies, and to improve the transparency of LPS sexual assault investigations. This is the mandate of the committee. So if there's any questions about what falls under the mandate of the committee and what doesn't, the complainant must be over the age of 16 and the suspect must be over the age of 18. And they review any sexual assault report where charges are not laid, including those classified as unfounded. The current members of the program are ANOVA, the London Abused Women's Center, Crawford FM, the Muslim Resource Center, Atlosa Native Family Healing Services, and Bellemere Law. So this is, I guess, what the committee does. So they identify any investigations for which the review committee has follow-up question or requires clarification. They meet with the LPS liaison officer, who is myself, to discuss any questions or concerns, and they document any observations and recommendations. The LPS liaison officer's responsibilities. So we provide a secure space at headquarters for the members of the committee, answer any questions or provide clarifying information as needed, review the documented observations and recommendations, and share both positive and negative feedback with the involved officers, and report any formal recommendations. Before I go through the statistics, I'll just kind of explain what happens when the committee comes, so everyone has an understanding. So they will set aside a day during the month or 2 days during the month where they will come to our police headquarters. We have a classroom reserved for them where they actually log on to one of our computers. And do you want me to explain?
Sorry, 1 second. Can everybody online double check that they're muted? We're getting feedback, please. My apologies.
No problem, sure. So they come into the classroom, they log on a computer, and then they're provided a list of occurrences that fall under the mandate that is compiled by myself. So they actually log into the police report and they read every document in that report. They also watch and listen to victim statements or witness statements or accused statements. And then as they are reviewing the case, they have an electronic form that they fill out. And that form contains different areas that they will comment on, like if the victim's interview was done appropriately, if they had any recommendations, things like that. And then that report comes to me. While they're here, we have very open dialogue, myself and them. If they have any questions that I can clarify them, I'm happy to do so. Members of my team go over and talk to them. So, and at the end of the day, we kind of sit down together and they talk about any concerns that they had with me. So these are the statistics for what cases fell under the case review program. So you can see that the percentages have stayed fairly consistent over the last 5 or so years. I know one question you may have is there any case where they have said we've made the wrong decision and as a result the case was reopened? So in my time that has not happened. And you know, some might say, is there a point continuing the program? And I would say absolutely yes. They provide a different lens than what we have working with survivors and victims every single day. So for them to come in and just say, you know, you use this language or term that may be police jargon in one of our statements, consider using this next time that maybe is a little less, appears less victim blaming or something like that. That feedback is essential and that feedback is brought back to my team so they consider that as they work through their investigations. And it's also important for me to be able to explain to them why we do certain things a certain way, because as I said, they support survivors every single day. So they may have a survivor where they can say, you know what, I did talk to the police and this is why this happens and why they ask those questions because they need it for their report. And so there is obviously a difference in the numbers that were included on the Police Service Board reports over the years. And that is simply because many investigations are still under investigation when the report is compiled because we start creating the report in January of the following year. So those cases at the end of the previous year, we don't know yet for sure if they fall under the mandate. These are some initiatives we started over the last couple of years. The first is the Victim Support Initiative. It is for historical and non-urgent cases. Our experience has been that victims have many, many questions about the reporting process. And often that's why they won't call the police because they just don't have an understanding of what happens when they do. So this initiative ensures the victims are fully informed about their process and their choices at the start of the investigation. It also ensures they get almost immediate support from a member of victim services right away as soon as they contact police. And we had over 100 referrals in 2023. And when they're going through the process, they're asked if it was helpful, and the majority of the victims do indicate that it was helpful to go through this initiative. So that is still continuing in 2024. In February of 2023, we also opened the Beacon House Child and Youth Advocacy Center. There are actually only 9 other child and youth advocacy centers open in all of Ontario. So we're very lucky in London to have an open and functioning CYAC. In 2023, we supported 122 children and youth, which is amazing in my opinion. And each family has a child advocate that is actually present when we attend the CYAC to conduct the interview that helps them navigate kind of the supports that are available to them in the community as they go through the healing process. So in this space, as you can see, it's very bright, welcoming to children. There's toys, there's fidget toys and things like that to help decrease anxiety. We also have basic need items like hygiene products, diapers, snacks. We have gently used clothing for any family that needs some clothing. And we also have some brand new toys available if the parents or guardian can't afford toys for Christmas, for birthdays, and that kind of thing. So all of our child interviews are now conducted at the CYAC because we have 2 interview rooms there available to us. And the last thing we started last year as well, I believe, is the Speak Out Anonymous Reporting Tool. So this tool was actually created and is owned by the Barrie Police Service. but they were gracious enough to allow us to expand these to London. So the tool is for victims over the age of 18. The victim provides no identifying information whatsoever. We know that sexual assault is a significantly underreported crime. This just gives victims another option to tell us what happened to them. The collection of data is essential to identify crime trends and serial offenders. So 24 victims reported through the tool in 2023, which doesn't seem like a large number, but as we go through the years and more data is collected, the more useful that it becomes to us. And that's it. So, any questions?
Thank you very much, Detective Sergeant Dan, the Detective Sergeant Creighton for the presentation. I imagine that there will be questions. So I'll know if the board, as Chair Walker, you can start us off.
So thank you both so much for coming and for your great presentation. And also thank you for your work. That it's very, very difficult work. And I know it must take its toll some days. And I really appreciate that you're there to help women as they come in. I wanted to start with a question, if I could, for the chief, because I'm trying to figure out in one of the business cases, I think there was funding to go for frontline training for all police officers to be able to deal with, do you know what I'm talking about, or am I completely off the rails here? I thought there was some funding provided to allow for police officers to receive training on domestic violence and sexual assault. As one of the business cases, is that right?
So you're talking about the multi-year budget?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, through you.
Yeah.
So the multi-year budget entails more resources to Catherine's unit.
Yeah.
And it also involves a different approach to how we're investigating sexual assaults, intimate partner violence, violence against women. And with that budget, it allows us 24-hour coverage and cross-training our members and our officers to deal with violence against women cases as they come in.
Right. Okay, so I appreciate that because, so to you, Ms. Dan, I wanted to ask, given you can't be everywhere at the same time, of the, how many frontline officers are training now, do you know, I mean, it must be very difficult for a woman, as an officer come that maybe new and not have all the expertise required for this sort of case management. How do you deal with that?
The training that the officers on the front line receives is primarily what's delivered at OPC, the Ontario Police
Right.
College. After that, my team does deliver presentations and training when they return from the police college, as well as at the 3-year mark. New officers also come and spend a day with our section just to hear us interview a victim and learn from us. I don't know if there's anything I can add.
No, I just wanted, because it's not enough. So it's difficult for somebody to get out of a restaurant, for instance, having been sexually assaulted and call the police and have an officer come who doesn't really understand the issue and maybe not as empathetic as they could have been. Because we know that women may never report again, right, in that case. So I am just wondering, given that is the case right now, it seems to me that the funding will allow that to maybe be decreased. Is that accurate? Once you get the funding, it will allow for comprehensive training across all officers, which hopefully will decrease the number of women who are reporting to an officer that may not understand the issues for a number of reasons.
I think I'll defer to the chief.
I did take that, Chair, through you. I appreciate that the budget has just been approved. As the board is fully aware, there is a lot of work for us to do to make sure that we meet the goals and the objectives of the multi-year budget. And the goal of this multi-year budget is to put more resources on the front lines, specifically to your comment, Vice Chair Walker, Catherine can't be everywhere.
Right.
So we have to increase the capacity of our front line as cases come in right away. So that involves training. That involves resources, that involves a restructure of our organization and the service delivery model that we're doing. So, you know, from a high level, yes, we have to have a training plan in place to make sure the people that are investigating these cases as they come in have the appropriate training with the trauma-informed lens, how to interact with victims and survivors of sexual assaults, and as well as children.
Right.
So
Okay,
the vision is to increase the capacity. We have 26 officers in the multi-year budget, new positions going to the front line for 24-hour coverage to handle these cases. The budget also is supporting increased staffing into Catherine's unit. And as we have more capacity on the front line, that means Catherine will be able to focus on the more serious investigations that come in.
okay, so let me ask you something about that, because I know that right now there's 1 detective sergeant, 5 detectives, and 6 detective constables. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep. And so would you suggest you could use more, or is that enough?
No, it's absolutely not enough.
So you let me transfer back to Ty
Yeah.
or the chief for a second. How many officers will be allocated then to Catherine's department to assist with that? Sorry.
Per specific unit.
Yeah.
In the next 4 years, 2, with the caveat that we're restructuring,
Yeah.
with the caveat that currently we have 0 on the front line with specialized training. Look at 26.
Right.
Right, with 24-hour coverage. So her workload is actually going to look different.
So I'm just asking these questions because in August 2022, Stats Canada reported that sexual assault is the only violent crime in Canada that's not funded. And just to sort of take that one step forward, that same report indicated that the sexual assault rate in 2021 was the highest since 1996. But what is most concerning to me is that number that is the highest since 2020 or 1996 resulted in only 34,000 complaints of sexual assault. So we're a big country. And when you think of it, how underserved this population is, when only 34,000 women feel safe enough to come forward and report, I think is pretty significant. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted this report to come back, because I think we always have to continue to talk about this and open the door to some people's minds, because not everybody understands the significance of this issue and how traumatic it is on women, and how one incident of sexual assault in any of its forms can impact a woman or girl for the rest of her life. And that's why it's not enough just to bring that report without the data. So I appreciate you bringing this forward. I just have a couple more questions.
Yeah, just to interrupt, Vice Chair Walker, I just wanted to let the board know I'm going to switch to remote. I have to get to a 13-year-old daughter. So I didn't want the presenters to think I was being disrespectful. I'll be listening in remotely at the meeting now. So
That's
go ahead.
kind of you to let us know. Thank you.
Well, I still want to participate. I just switched to the old remote version. So thank you.
So I know that I'm taking a lot of time on this, but this issue is really important to me in my life. And I wondered, you said that none of the files were from the committee were sent back for further investigation. There might have been recommendations or things like that. And then you also said that you don't think, even though, and there is funding, the funding is at risk right now, as you might know, for that, for the program, the case review program. And do you know how many files were reviewed over the last 5 years?
For the last 5 years. So during COVID, there were no reviews
Right.
conducted. So that was 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
I believe it was close to 290 cases that were reviewed last year, but over the last 5 years, I don't have that.
290.
Yes,
Yeah.
last year, I believe.
So for me, I just want to be really clear, and I hope that everybody will continue to advocate that funding be found in some manner, because what that case review team does is absolutely critical for accountability. It's critical for women feeling safe and secure in coming in to report. And it's critical in making sure that there would be no wrong door a woman could enter to disclose. So if that funding is actually cut, I hope police and your department and other departments will stand up with women's advocates to support it continuing. I just want to ask you, I think just a couple more, and I'm sorry, I really appreciate taking this time. So who, I asked that question, okay, so I was really pleased to see your statistics. Because those statistics that, not these statistics, the ones that were in your report, I think were so important. To be consistent with what, StatsCan and everybody has reported, that it is growing. The number of women being sexually assaulted is not being reduced. It is growing. And you can see that growth pattern in your statistics from year after year. And that's a sad reflection, which tells me we have a lot more work to do in this area. And again, if there is any funding available to come to your department to help with that, I think it's critical. We can never save women, but we can certainly offer them the tools they need to be safe and to feel comforted and to feel safe in coming forward. And it's hard for you to do that on your own, or you with 5 or 6 others even to do that. So I just really wanted to mention that. And then my final, what I just wanted to say is that, I have done this work for a long time, and sexual assault to some people means a stranger sexually assaulting them. But in fact, for many women, they are sexually assaulted. Sorry, did I say the partner or stranger, right? Yeah. For many women, they are actually assaulted by their partners, which makes it so difficult for them ever to seek help or stay in help for a long period of time. Because as we know in this community, there are not enough homes for women to go to stay safely, which means they may come and report, but go right home to the abuser, where they continue to be sexually assaulted. And what we know from a recent research report that came from a judge is that sexual assaults have become much more violent. And in fact, he labeled it torture. And that's what women are facing in their homes and on the streets and in the community every single day. And I think we have a responsibility to women and to girls to make sure that we unturn every stone or opportunity to make sure that we can provide them with safety. And I know that you're doing that, and I appreciate it. And I wish there were a lot more of you, because I know that no matter how many there are, it will never be enough. Just had one last thing to say, because Matthew from CBC is here, and we had a talk yesterday. And I indicated I would look into something for him, because the media has expressed an interest in learning more about what the case review team does, which I think is fabulous, because I think the more people understand what's going on, the more they talk about it, the better the understanding of what's going on will be. So I did want you to know, Matthew, that I've consulted with this team. And what we have to do is put in a request to have that go to the review team, or to request that they be part of a mock, situation. Wasn't that you that was asking me about this? Yeah. So I'm going to help you with that, give you some introductions for that to happen, because I really think it's valuable for you to follow through on that. So that's all I have. I just am so appreciative. And I just really feel you're changing lives. So thank you. And thank you, Alex, as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walker. I'll go to the chief, followed by member Voss.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I'll just have a quick comment. Just, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Vice Chair Walker, for your advocacy, your experience, and, you know, how you feel about this space and this important work, the incredible work that Alex and Catherine and their team are doing is a priority for this organization. So I just want to thank you for your advocacy and continuing to always raise awareness to this issue. And we know that it is extremely underreported, and we know the reasons why. So that's the first comment I wanted to make. The second comment I want to make is I really want to thank this board for their support, for your support through the budget process and city council for ultimately supporting the budget. Because you see, if you look at the number of officers we've asked to allow for the next 4 years is 97. It's almost 30% are going to be investigating at the front lines in this space, intimate partner violence, sexual assaults, persons crimes. That is an investment into the community, and it is in alignment with the community safety and well-being plan that this city has conferred upon. So just thank you to the board. I'm grateful that, and we are grateful of your advocacy, because we're all trying to do better for this community. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Chief. Member Voss.
Thank you, through the chair, to Alex and Catherine, just thank you for your work. I really appreciate it. The report was substantial and there's a lot of information in there. So thank you for giving us that much detail. I'm looking forward to seeing you get more resources, and more importantly, I'm looking forward to that training getting on to the front lines with the new service delivery model that the chiefs talked about. And this is just one example of why this board fought so hard for this budget. It's items like this. This is an area where you did great work with not enough resources. So like this is one of the areas we need to fix. And this is just one example of the important work that the London Police Service does, that our frontline officers do on the ground. And I look forward to making sure that we can make it more efficient and we can make it better for Londoners and for taxpayers who expect a top level of service, especially for crimes of this nature. I also look forward to hearing challenges that you're experiencing over the next few years. And I think that's very important. Oftentimes we get reports into the board, we talk about it, we say, good job, okay, what do you need, what can we do? And either we make a decision to fund something or not, and then we don't really hear about it more. And on something like this, and many other areas as well in our service, I think we can hear more about the challenges you're facing, because this isn't going to be a perfect process as we change the service delivery model and as we modernize this service. So I really look forward to hearing how things are going and how we can do better and how we can support you further as a board. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions by any of the members with regards to this report? I need somebody to move a motion that the board receives for informational purposes the sexual assault and child abuse section and victim advocate case review program report, as well as a related PowerPoint presentation. Moved by Vice Chair Walker, seconded by Member Branscombe. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, I owe you, well, I'm an apology. I think I demoted you. It's like, I'm sorry for the perspective. I don't know if that's what you write you. Appreciate you both. Thank you so much for your presentation.
I just have one more thing to say. My team will be listening today, so I just want to say thank you to them. They're truly, truly an incredible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you lose your picture?
No, yeah. My leg just locked up. I'm sorry.
Okay. All the lawyers held their breath when you fell. Just not here, say you're okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on in the agenda, we're going to agenda item 10, which is the tactical training report by way of I'm gonna look over to you, Chief Sean, but by way of background, this is a report that I asked the chief to bring in the aftermath of some of the Dubai training report there. So looking forward to your report.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I should have clarified on the agenda and so my apologies, Chair. In the body of the Superintendent Scott Guilford. He's in charge of the Uniform Division. He has a extensive background with special weapons and tactics. I've asked Inspector Ryan Scribbins to join us, and he's accompanied by Staff Sergeant Doug Brown. Ryan Scribbins oversees the Emergency Response Unit, and I've asked them to come provide a brief overview of their unit and to educate the board a little bit in the community, and then I'll go into the report.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
I'm sorry, that's right.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's been a long day, so I'll try to be brief or get you through to your, how many hours, how much time?
It's counting, but, 2 hours and like 52 minutes.
Fair, board, thanks for having us. And my esteemed colleague Doug Brown will be up after my short presentation here. And obviously there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions either at the conclusion of mine or maybe at the conclusion of both. We're hopefully only going to be 15 minutes or so. I'll aim to be expedient here. So specific to incident command, as the chief indicated, part of my area of the area I oversee or my portfolio includes the emergency response unit, but it also includes incident command. So incident command, for those of you that may not know, what is it? It's police-centric training. It's taught by both the Ontario Police College and the Canadian Police College. I'm a certified instructor at both institutions, and I teach both locally and in Ottawa on a regular basis. The incident command program was designed a number of years ago with the intention to provide a systematic and layered approach. So it starts at the 100 level for frontline officers. So I think as of 2019 at OPC, all frontline constables would take this online training, and it teaches them how to systematically respond to over the types of calls and the types of incidents that they're going to respond to. That then matures into a 200 level course. We're actually teaching one right now this week at the Emergency Operations Center. That is geared more towards our comm supervisors and our frontline sergeants and supervisors. And then the 300 level, which we teach here locally to our staff sergeants, and then it moves up to a 400 level or critical incident command level at the Canadian Police College for our duty inspectors and for our senior officers that are so qualified. Locally and as per adequacy, as we're required to, in relation to adequacy standards and the new incoming Police Safety and Policing Act, is that we have to establish procedures in which a major and or critical incident commander is required, and obviously what those situations are. So as you can see here, and you can read along as I'm speaking, what is a major incident? So that can include anything of an ERU activation, and Staff Sergeant Brown will speak a little bit more in detail about that once I'm finished with my presentation. Any negotiator activation, any public order unit activation, major civil disturbance, a level 1 missing person. So those are the missing people that are emergent in nature. So we're talking about, there's a wide range of those. I know there was a missing person report earlier today. So say, for example, if a 4-year-old went missing, personal double timers, and it doesn't have to be that extreme, but something where it's emergent, where this person clearly can't fend for themselves, then that triggers our major incident command procedure. As you can see also, any significant investigative scene, and then any other event is determined by the superintendent. Currently in London, in order to be qualified as major incident commander, you have to be the rank of a staff sergeant or higher.
MIC, so that's the short form for Major Incident Commander, obviously. They have to remain active and current because it is a perishable skill. It's not something you can be qualified on and then 10 years later, after you've spent time in a non-operational role, come back to and just jump back in the chair. Okay, so we maintain active annual training on that regard as well. As I spoke about, the IC acronym being Incident Command Training through the Ontario Police College to including the 300 level, and IMS training may sound familiar to all of you. That is Incident Management System training. It's offered by Emergency Management Ontario. It's conducted out at our Emergency Operations Center in Byron. So members of our fire, City of London staff, paramedics, I know some of members from University of Western will get that level of training. Those are for some of our joint events. So when we have maybe a flood or something unfortunate like the building collapse from a number of years ago, or even homecoming, we're organizing that structure because we're working with other agencies on a consistent basis. And again, obviously, like I said, they have to maintain consistent activity in their role. Now we move to a critical incident. So this obviously is what would already constitute a major incident, but because of the size and the scope, requires a critical incident commander. So currently in London, that would include a hostage taking, any act of terrorism. There is a new plan in place. If you weren't aware from the province, it was put into place in November and it's in concert with the incoming legislation of the CSPA as of April 1. And that's the Extreme Incident Response Plan. Basically, it took that level of what used to just be for an act of terrorism to now include that, as well as any multiple active attacker situation, any mass casualty event, as we saw in Nova Scotia from 2020, any major impact on critical infrastructure, whether it be an attack or an occupation, like we saw in Ottawa with Convoy or we saw at the Ambassador Bridge. So those types of events, and then obviously as you read down the list, armed barricaded individual, the suspected firearm, multi-agency public order unit deployment, and then obviously the caveat of anything else that might be as determined by the superintendent. So for critical incident commander, of course, minimum qualifications are going to include all the ones in black font that are already indicated as a major incident commander. And then you'll see in red that IC 400 or CIC. The CIC is the parallel or equivalent as offered through the Canadian Police College to the 400 level training at OPC. And then the IMS piece, you'll see that there's actually an additional requirement to have IMS 300. Once again, though, also need to participate in annual training, maintain an active log. So when we talk about incident command, try and get to the actual specifics of what is it, is we want the initial response from the initial call in 911, the initial police officer showing up, right through to the supervisors, either in the comms area, the sergeants responding on the street, and then obviously until the arrival of a major critical incident commander, and we call it setting the table. So it empowers them to give them a responsibility to understand what the priorities are. Obviously, this training goes, hand in hand with community safety. This is exactly why we're doing this. And we've been doing it for a couple of years now. We're going to continue to train in this regard. So I'll reference two additional acronyms there, SMEAC and iClear. You may have heard of SMEAC before. It's used in other emergency service and, even non-emergency service venues. And I'll go over the specifics of what each of those letters stand for and what that means, as well as one that you may not have heard, which is iClear. So basically the role is we want to empower people that they are in command and that they're running and they're managing these events until someone who is able to get there with the higher level of qualifications gets there. So they manage and basically hold down and do what they need to do until the person of the higher rank and the higher level of training gets there. So you can read along as I speak here, SMEAC. So yes, obviously the situation, it's what dictates everything. So we're running training today at the EOC. I was teaching there this morning, and we're running through actually a call, Vice Chair, somewhat specific to what you were just speaking about, a scenario where we have a male who is in a house with a female, there's a child in the house, there's indications that he may be assaulting and or sexually assaulting the female that's inside. So we give that scenario to the officers. Obviously, there's some other injects and there's other inputs that are put in there, and the officers understand what they have to do in order to prioritize what's important. Obviously, community safety being the most. Obviously, we start with anyone who may be in that house and then the general public, followed then by ourselves, of course. So the who, what, why, where, when, that leads us to obviously the circumstances at hand, then dictate the mission. The mission is really the goal. It's the goal, the objective, it's what we're trying to achieve. So in that case, and I'll give you an example one, it may be something as simple as, we're here to rescue the female and the child and arrest the subject. Something short, it's concise. We broadcast it, we message it because we know we have junior officers, we know we have young people showing up on that call. So those sergeants are empowered to make sure they're taking control of these situations as we arrive. The execution, and that's where the iClear piece will come into in the next slide. How are we going to achieve this? So we know what we have, we know what we want to do. Now, how are we going to do it? Right? Obviously, each case is different. A high-risk call for service with an ERU activation may be much different than a public order activation or searching for a level 1 missing person. Administration, pretty self-explanatory. That's who are you going to need? What are you going to need to help you do it? Right? Those could be internal resources, external resources, and you'll see a non-exhaustive list here in the near future. And then, of course, the C, command control communication, as self-explanatory in that case. So as I went through, again, not necessarily exhaustive information, but a lot of the information that we may be looking for, again, dependent upon the call type. So as I mentioned earlier, in terms of a mission statement, again, if it was for a level 1 missing person, your mission statement could be, we want to find the 4-year-old child, we want to find Johnny Smith in the most timeliest manner in the best condition possible, right? So that everyone understands, okay, that's the goal. What are we going to need now? How are we going to do it? So when it comes to the execution piece, this is where we look at iClear. So this acronym you may or may not have seen before. This is a police-centric, again, specific to the OPC and CPC world. So you may not have seen this unless you've been a part of this or been a part of that training at any point in time. Isolate and identify. Again, if we're speaking tapes, for example, to a high-risk call for service, as I mentioned, one of the scenarios from this morning, we want to identify the location, the subject. We want to isolate that area from outside influence. We want to have containment and control of that area. Containment obviously could be inner and outer perimeters because we want to make sure that that situation is isolated. We also don't want other people that are otherwise unaware to come into a dangerous area. Less lethal long guns, obviously that's self-explanatory as required, of course, depending on the situation you have. Evacuation. So again, we talk about that scenario, for example, from this morning where we're putting our officers and our members through that role playing and through that lifelike situation. And aside from the people in the house now, as we gear our mission and our execution plans towards that, who else do we need to be concerned of, right? So obviously unsuspecting neighbors, you know, people out on the sidewalk, people out on the street, because we have a responsibility to make sure that they're safe as well. Authorities, it goes without saying, our members know that obviously at all times, these 3 authorities are always, they're constant and they're consistent of in terms of what grounds may we have for arrest, our lawful positioning, and then obviously members understanding that they have the use of force as required. React plans. This is something you may not be as familiar with. So this situation empowers, again, our frontline members. Our sergeants at the 200 level, and then obviously as it moves to the 300 and 400 level, gets a little more complex in that we may have more deliberate plans that take place and are enacted as time goes on and as specialty resources arrive. But an immediate action plan, if you consider every 2 years, our members train in something called IRD, immediate rapid deployment. That's something they train in, for example, our training unit will run them through a school shooting scenario. You know, we've seen what has happened in the past at Columbine, even in the recent past of Uvalde. And so when I ask members if they understand what an immediate action plan is, I tell them you actually launch and initiate one every time you run through that training. Because you are showing up at a call, you are showing up when we do that scenario-based training, and you are being told someone has gone into school and is performing, you know, firing rounds off and shooting at children, you know, obviously putting the lives of children at risk. And as a result of that training, you are launching into the school in your group of 3 or 4, even by yourself. You are initiating an immediate action plan. So we're giving them the constraints and the confines of when that's appropriate and when it's not. And then breakout plans, obviously, if that doesn't isn't self-explanatory, that's in relation to potentially a suspect or the subject during a high-risk call. So the breakout meaning that person decides they're going to now try to evade the perimeter, try to, you know, run out the back door, jump out a window, run out the front door. Do we have plans in place to deal with them if they go on foot, if they have access to a vehicle? So it sets the table and allows our members to show up with intention and be able to obviously prepare for the incoming additional resources and obviously incident commander if the situation isn't resolved. As far as the administration piece, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a list of resources that are commonly used during some of those activations. Obviously, you know, if it's specific to a missing person, a search manager, if it's specific to public order event, obviously public order unit and a related commander. If it's a high-risk call, obviously members of the emergency response unit and negotiators, as well as a mental health professional, and the list goes on. The last piece of SMEAC, obviously, is the command control communication piece that I showed in one of the earlier slides. The incident commander obviously being at the top of the triangle, and then depending upon the incident type, you will have a subject matter expert, for example, from your tactical team, as well as your negotiator team for a high-risk call for service. You, for instead, when I worked on the weekend with St. Patrick's Day, public order commander and PLT. So PLT stands for police liaison training. Those are the people that are out there working tirelessly with all of our regular event demonstration organizers. They've got good relationships with them, and they provide that, you know, that intelligence, that information on how do we best communicate with some of these people so that, you know, we can mitigate the impacts to traffic, or we can mitigate the impacts to disturbing, you know, other areas while still, you know, recognizing their freedom of speech. And then lastly, you can see, obviously, if it's a level 1 missing person, you'd have a search manager. They're going to be your best friend, give you the indications of where the highest priorities are that you need to search, and the priority in what areas you should search first. And then you have a family liaison or investigative liaison to help you out as well. So that concludes my portion. I think in maybe the best interest of time, Chair, if you're good with it, I can introduce Staff Sergeant Doug Brown to continue, unless you'd like to open it up to questions now.
No, let's do that. Let's just continue.
Yes, sir. Okay. So Staff Sergeant Doug Brown is currently in charge of our emergency support section. So he oversees the emergency response unit as well as the K9 unit. And he's been in that role since 2021, and he's going to continue on there. So thanks, Doug.
I just want to say, Inspector Scrivens, just when I thought I was getting a good grasp on police apprehension, because get the hell out of here. Yeah, so, yeah.
And Chair, to be honest, I actually left about 3 or 4 of them. I really didn't want to go beat by fire hose here, and I know you haven't eaten in a while.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Inspector. It's really difficult to go after Inspector, especially one that much of an eloquent speaker as he is. You lead me first through the breach to set the stage for him. So, as he said, my name is Doug Brown. I'm Staff Sergeant of the Emergency Response Unit. I actually head up the Emergency Support Section, which has the Emergency Response Unit and the K9 unit. What you're going to hear from me today is about the Emergency Response Unit. Here's some of the members, actually all the members that are currently deployed today. I'm very proud of. So this slide is really important, and you're going to hear me refer to this slide throughout this presentation, but our section mandate is to provide expert support services in specialized areas by assisting in the resolution of high-risk incidents using minimum force. And I think it bears to just sit on and dwell on this, because in a perfect world, the mere arrival of the ERU members should and hopefully resolve the incident. That would be the best, minimum force. Our section's accredited 3 times over by the ministry. And when I say that, if you look at the circles, you'll see there's perimeter control and containment, tactical response, and hostage rescue. If you move left to right, you increase the risk mitigation. It starts a little bit lower and it gets hotter as you get to hostage rescue. But with that movement from left to right, you also increase your training, maybe some more of your equipment. And I'm very proud to tell you and the community that your London Police ERU satisfies all 3 requirements, and not all TAC teams in the province have these. So we're very proud. Principles of tactical operations. The first bullet point is essentially, and it says primary. The primary responsibility of London Police Emergency Response Section and unit is the safety and protection of the general public, and that really is the bulk of our work. Anything we do comes back to that primary responsibility. We are out there to provide services and service delivery in hopes to protect the public, essentially. We work on the premise that every decision must be predicated on the philosophy that human life, hostages, civilians, police officers, and suspects, usually in that order, is sacred and constitutes the first priority of devising any strategy that we employ. We're responsible for the safety and protection of other officers present. We have a duty to effect the safe release of any hostages where possible and to apprehend the suspects. This last bullet point goes back to the mandate, which I already spoke about. We follow the general principle that all incidents will be resolved peacefully and direct armed action will only be undertaken as a last resort. The minimum amount of force used to resolve a high-risk incident. That was the first slide. We do fall under the incident command umbrella. Inspector Scrivens gave us a detailed account of that. And he mentioned that I might mention this to you. And what is an ERU activation? When might ERU be activated? Well, this is a quite detailed slide. The first one is obvious. ERU shall be deployed in all hostage situations. We here in London train extensively in hostage rescue tactics, this being the highest, the penultimate of risk. So for sure, the ERU would be involved. Moving down, may be deployed in all confirmed situations involving armed or barricaded persons, the arrest of armed suspects or dangerous offenders. You'll see ERU activated in the rescuing of injured citizens or police officers. Now, this one is something I wanted to just pause on too, is that any situation where there's a potential for violence beyond the training of regular patrol officers. I've paused here for a second because I think what some people don't realize is ERU doesn't sit at the station. We don't wait for high-risk calls. We don't deploy only when we're required. We are actually out there on patrol, and some of you may know that. But we actually patrol all the time just in case this happens. Is there a potential for any event to happen that's beyond the training of a regular patrol officer at any given time, at any given moment? Yes, it is, and it happens regularly. And you'll hear later from me about how often that happens. We're responsible for the containment and control of sniper activity. We are used as an entry and security team on a warrant where the potential for criminal use of weapons or violence is anticipated. Such entry and security is beyond the operating limits of members with their normal equipment and training. We provide static and mobile security where there's potential for violence. There's some examples there at the courts for maybe some high emotions at courts. We will provide security for that. VIP visits. Essentially, the best example of that was when the Prime Minister would come. We'd help and assist the RCMP who are the primary on security. We'd also assist. Special functions, prisoner escorts. We are capable of doing static and mobile surveillance where there's potential for violence, roadblocks, special projects, motorcycle gang projects. We also are trained to approach, enter, and search areas or buildings for suspected dangerous offenders. Most of that work is done in conjunction with our K9 unit, which I'm not going to present today, but again, most of that work is with them.
Should have brought some dogs.
I know, and that's the thing. The dogs are the big hit, aren't they? Not quite me. Here's our current complement. So in blue, the staff sergeant, that would be me. You see K9 fall under the umbrella. From there, what's important is that there's 3 teams, each led by a sergeant. Under those sergeants, you have 5 constables, and a delineation between the constables, you'll see that there's a constable labeled TL, team leader. Now, the team leader is generally, not always, but the most experienced constable. But this is someone who's established a great pattern of making sound and timely decisions under stress. And they will act as a liaison between the constables and sergeant and or do the duties of the sergeant if the sergeant is not available. Okay, so this slide is going to give you a snapshot of the training. I just want to stress that it's going to be hard for you to consume this and actually get a real feel for it. I wish you could come out with us and train for a week and just see exactly what this is, but you'd like to, I know.
For the bullshit.
I know. I know it's a public session. Now I'm getting emails from the public. It's, well, you're very much welcome to come. So the first 2 lines deal with we are mandated and required to train once a week. And we do that as a full team. We also spend another day of that week for our snipers. Our snipers go out because they have such a high specialty that they do train weekly. Under those, we are required by the ministry to train for 2 weeks as a full team. And this is designed to come together cohesively and also know what we're all doing and doing it the same. You'll see that there's 5 there. There's 5 weeks. We do 4 full weeks, and I've listed another one which I'll get to. spring training week, which is coming up. We get together, we train every single tactic that we normally train. And we do it for cohesiveness, for everyone being on board, everyone having the same ideas, how to resolve some of these incidents. The next one is new member HRT. Because, and HRT stands for hostage rescue, because hostage rescue is such a high risk incident, we want our new people to get used to it. So that's not just for 1 year, that could be for 2 or 3 years. The new member gets 1 full week by themselves, specific training with our instructors. The week shortly after, the full team gets together, the new people, the experienced people, and they train together. And lastly on there is the Rappel Week. He is a emergency response unit, very proud of our rappel skills. And again, I invite you to come out on one of those days if you'd like to hang by rope. But this is everything that we do operationally via rope on ropes. And I could get into that, but I don't have enough time for you guys. To come to the Citizens Academy, I know there's been some members on the board who have seen this. I'm passionate, I'm intense, a little more detailed than this, but I invite every board member to come. This is the second last slide. I'm sure you're all breathing a sigh of relief, but this doesn't, again, this is a microcosm of what we're doing out there and how busy we are. And I'm just going to speak really quickly on what this means. These stats that you see before are simply planned warrants. These are operations we know are going to happen. We plan for them, we're ready for them, and then we execute them, meaning what can be warrant service. So what you're looking at is in 2008, we did 14 planned deployments. And as you move across, you can see it's getting busier. The last completed year of 2023, we did 64 planned deployments. And you may think to yourself, 64 times in a year, it's, I don't know, is that impressive? Well, just wait. So of those 64 planned deployments, 2 or 3 of those days are pre-operational planning. That means 2 or 3 days of work before the operation. It might be reaching out to some of our community partners like EMS, fire to get them on board. We use internal resources like surveillance units, guns and gangs, our investigative response unit to help us build our plan to do this successfully. And then you get to the event where you actually do what you're supposed to do, which doesn't honestly sometimes last a long time, but as you've seen, sometimes it's hours and hours and hours to get some of these things done. And then as Detective Sergeant Dan said earlier, then afterwards you have to get feedback. And for us, feedback doesn't necessarily come from the public, but it comes from inside. We talk about how do you do things better, because no execution of anything ever goes perfect. And our goal is to get better every time. So that's what you see here. Now, again, I stress 64 doesn't seem like a lot. I've told you how much goes into each one of those 64, but then imagine your 520 hours of training. Imagine your training weeks. And I didn't even talk about the specialties. This will be the less lethal operators, the gas munitions, the taser instructors, all those weeks that come into play for 365 days of the year. I'll tell you as a ERU member, there's nothing that's not on the horizon. We're not just sitting at the station. We're actually really busy. We do a lot of there. We do a lot of training. So this is just a simple example that we are getting busier and busier as time goes on, the city grows. That's what that means. And that takes us to the last one. I know it says no questions, but it says thanks for being patient. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Appreciate that. Members, I guess to end phase 1 of this report, are there any questions for either Inspector Scrivens or Staff Sergeant Brown with regards to the presentation? I felt like I was back in university days there. Absolutely. Right, boss.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of discussion about the light armored vehicles and what they're used for in your work. I was just wondering if you could go into a bit more into how they are deployed, how they are used, why is it important to have more than one? There's been a lot out there in the media, a lot of questions asked. I was wondering, as someone who's in the vehicle, who's commanding these teams, if you could speak a bit more about it.
Of course. I don't wish to speak about my station. I know the senior administration would have some of my reports that speak on this. So I will say that the light armored vehicles are used mainly as a fallback for containment positions to protect the members versus harm. The light armored vehicles are used to contain vehicles that may have dangerous people inside or dangerous substances. We've used that in the past. They're used for officer rescue, citizen rescue. They provide a platform to give cover, to get things done. The thing that I don't think a lot of people understand about the light armored vehicle is it's a clear indication that police are on scene. So, you know, to speak about a warrant, if you execute a warrant, but the light armored vehicle is parked out front with the lights on, it's a clear indication of the people inside that were there. It's a clear indication in the neighborhood that everything's okay. The police are here and things are gonna be all right. It's not just a noise that's happening in the middle of the night.
And I think if I can just have Ross expand on that. When you look during my presentation, like obviously from the emergency response unit, they're the members operating, they're the members in it. For an incident commander who is in charge of an incident, that vehicle really, it's ballistic protection on wheels. It really is. So it provides safety for our members, but more importantly, it provides safety for the public. If there's an individual, for example, in a house that's armed with a firearm, if our officers arrive on scene and aren't able to access equipment like that, their positions of containment, when I talked about the inner perimeter, have to be a little further back because they could be based on the nature of the landscape. Like if there's not a solid tree in the front yard, if there isn't a brick wall nearby, they may then in turn have to be a little further back than they would like to be, which then in turn allows that potential person, if they decide on their own to flee from that house, armed with a weapon, there is a greater chance they're going to be able to potentially get away, get out of our perimeter. By having a light armored vehicle, for example, parked directly in front of the residence, blocking in any vehicles that potentially could leave, while giving those members close, direct contact and access, it further puts pressure on that on that individual or that subject to stay within that residence, which is what we want, because we don't want that person going mobile in the public, because obviously their level of safety is of extreme importance.
Thank you.
That's a really good question. I just want to say, I think these presentations are really remarkable and I'm really glad we're doing them. The one that Megan had asked about the sexual assault unit and now what you guys do. I don't think the public really knows what goes on in a day in the police department. They only see, you know, bits of things in the news. And so hopefully with this awareness and at public meetings, we'll be able to really put a spotlight on all the good work that's being done here and how the community is protected by the work that you do. I'm just amazed. You kind of know what's going on, but when you put it in those terms and all the training that you have and how you're deployed, I'm really proud of this police service, and thank you very much for.
Thank you for saying
all
that.
this.
Thank you. That contributes a lot, actually.
Thank you, Member Branscombe. Any other members for questions for this part?
Just reiterate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Member Branscombe, I think shares the sentiment of the entire board. She said it eloquently. So thank you. I know people saying it sounds almost community, but thank you for your service.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Chief, I believe you're gonna take in now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chair, through you. So that was for context, for a little bit of a deeper understanding. And you have a board report for you as requested for information purposes. I won't read that board report, it's there. I'm here to provide some context and here to answer any questions that arise as a result of the report. Having said that, the context that I do want to provide, and in addition to what Staff Sergeant Brown and Inspector Skirvings had spoken about, all that training for them, like, these are the best of the best for us. When our officers need help, this is who we call. That training outlined, that's minimum standards. That is minimum adequacy standards that they need. So as a chief of police, I don't want my officers to have just the minimum. No chief does that. Every chief wants to make sure they have the best trained officers, no matter what they're doing. And training is a challenge because we only have so many resources. But finding the best training is always a challenge. An opportunity arose for the members of our emergency response unit to compete in the international SWAT competition. Now, when I say SWAT, that is a term, special weapons and tactics, not a Canadian term, but it's a universal term that everybody knows. That term refers to police. That term is not a military term. That term was born out of a police service to describe these members. We use emergency response unit across Ontario. You'll hear other terms, emergency response team, but that's essentially interchangeable. So when the option and the opportunity came to light about competing at the international SWAT competition, the decision-making involved understanding this is an opportunity to provide our officers with the best training. And when we're talking about a competition, that's not only a competition, it's a training opportunity. Because the goal of training is to increase the capacity, prepare, making sure our officers improve on what they're supposed to be doing. The mere sake of competition of itself, under pressure, challenging yourself against the best of the best. This is considered the Olympics of emergency response. That was a decision that weighed heavily upon approval. When our officers went to Dubai, information came to light into the community that questioned the amount of money it cost, why Dubai, questioned with the validity of the training. There was questions about, oh, was it a vacation, etc. Do they need this training? As a result of that, I spoke to the media on February 8th, Chair, alongside yourself. I won't name the media outlet. However, I answered those questions. And following that interview, when these questions were asked of me, I answered every question that was asked by the reporter. February 18th, or I believe 18th or 16th, a week later, new information came to light. And this new information that came to light that I did not know about at the time, only after our officers returned. The information that came to light once our officers returned, that came to my attention, was that competitors from controversial military teams were in attendance. So when that came to light, I wasn't aware, because my understanding, this was a law enforcement competition, law enforcement opportunity to train. Special weapons and tactics, SWAT, is synonymous with law enforcement. No idea that there were military teams sent. I understand there was over 70 teams from across the world that attended. So upon return, the incident for me as the chief and for our organization highlighted the fact that we don't have an adequate evaluation process to vet international training or competition. And in this time of, unprecedented geopolitical pressures and conflict around the world, because this information came out, I will tell you that I lament the hurt that members of our community felt. Some members were impacted by this information. And what made matters deeply troubling for me was that the interview that I did on February 8th, when I did not know this new information came to light, was now put into the new information. So the information that I had supported our members to attend and talked about the value and the cost now was portrayed in a way that was completely inaccurate. And it impacted our community, which is something that I'm not happy about. What all of this has truly put a candle to is this is why moving forward, we're going to be implementing a review process. We're going to be implementing a procedure, mechanisms in place. So when we get opportunities that require, or there's opportunities at an international level outside of North America, that we don't fall into this situation again. And I will say that all of us as police officers, our job is to make this city safe and this community safe. I'm the chief of police. I wish I knew everything. I don't. I certainly am no expert in the geopolitical landscape. My focus is this community and our membership and our organization. I would challenge anyone without a PhD or a, real formal education who knows all these world politics. I'm not making any excuses. I'm simply making an observation in this organization that we do not have experts in our organization to inform us. That is why in the report that you see before you, we're going to develop a process, and that involves, we have 2 world-class educational institutions in London, University of Western Ontario and Shaw College. I've already reached out to President Alan Shepard, President Peter Devlin, to start the process for assistance. They have experts in this space. They have the expertise that we would require. So the process will involve the approval process, how it makes it up, to what level, what's considered. But before we approve any training from an international level outside of North America, the process will involve engaging our community partners. And I say this without a firm we're in. Having said that, I haven't had further conversations with Peter Devlin. I've had preliminary conversations with Alan Shepard, a great leader who wants to assist and support. So what I say to this board is, within the next 2 board meetings, I will have a process in place to share with the board on what that's going to look like, so that this doesn't happen again. Subject to any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Chief, for that report. Members, questions for the chief with regards to the report? Start with Member Lehman, followed by Member Goss, followed by Vice Chair Walker.
It's hard to figure out where to begin on this one. When we first heard of the location, there was serious cause for concern. And then when the news broke too, that there was organizations that were involved in the invasion of Ukraine. It just, how did we get here? Before I get into what I want to just comment on, I just want to ask the chief, part of this review and developing a policy, will that, because I know the board doesn't get involved in operations, we are policy driven. Are we, as a board, going to be working to sign off in the policy, and will that policy involve you coming to the board for approval on any international training?
So, and Chair, through you, the board has full right to implement the policy. I will do all the legwork with our people, with our community, present a policy, a procedure for your approval.
Okay. Staff Sergeant Brown, in his presentation alluded to the Citizen Academy, which I know a number of members of the board took, as myself. When you do that, we got a taste of it today, you realize the lethal atmosphere that the police operate in. And not only the lethal concern, but in a neighborhood environment. It's not out in a war zone, or this is in our city. Then when Inspector Scribbins was described the incredible complex procedures that has to happen immediately, you realize what I heard you say is you want a team that is world-class. We hear world-class all the time, world-class restaurants, world-class theater, world-class athletes. Well, what does that mean to be world-class? And I take your point, Chief. To be world-class, you have to train internationally. You have to find the best that you can train with. But that comes with complex situations, and we've run into that right now. The international world is a very complex environment to that. I believe the importance of that training should not preclude us from international training. But definitely, there has to be some very strict guidelines and procedures that we have to follow before we engage in that. So I'm happy to hear that you're consulting with people that have much more experience than you and your team and than us as a board, because this is getting up into pretty complex areas. So I'm looking forward to hearing how their input is and what they decide. And when we are faced with decisions on where to seek training outside our borders, that we have the proper mechanisms in place so that we don't find ourselves in this situation again.
Thank you, Member Lehman, Member Goss.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Member Lehman covered off a lot of the questions that I had, but I do have a few additional ones, and through you to the chief. I guess I was wondering, you talk about developing a vetting process for evaluating international training opportunities, and this would we would consult Western, Fanshawe, some experts in the area. Will you also be doing a scan of other police forces in the Big 12 to see whether or not they do have a policy in place for international travel, and maybe what the best practices are there?
So I think that's a great question. I can tell you from my knowledge, I don't believe any police service in the GTA or the province has a procedure in place that involves external partners, experts like Fanshawe and University of Western Ontario. This will be, I believe it'll be the first procedure policy in place. And I also say I don't want to put, commit Fanshawe and Western to this. I've raised it with them. I feel good about it. Having said that, I don't want to commit them without fully committing them. Having said that, if for whatever reason they don't want to assist, which I highly don't think will happen, we'll still do reach out and engage community partners with the expertise and the capacity. And, if I can just add on to your comment, Councillor Lehman. This is a nuanced environment, circumstance, anytime you have international travel, more so today than 10 years ago. And you saw the work and how important the responsibilities that the emergency response unit holds. I really want to stress that one mistake by them is fatal to the community or to us. So I'm happy that you have acknowledged that we have to seek the best training for the people, especially in this area. But again, I will say, moving forward, when you look at international travel outside of North America, you're looking at it from a different lens, and we're looking at it from a lens to ensure that it aligns with our community and our community values. And we need help for that. We need help for that because initially, before all this, the concern was, well, Dubai. That was a concern. And I can tell you, for us, we didn't have the expertise, but in that decision-making process involved, okay, what does global affairs think? What do we have an embassy in Dubai? Is there an embassy here in Canada? Are there bilateral trade agreements? And we took it as face value, yes. So, and again, that highlights the importance of seeking that expertise that we need that's outside of these walls.
So, sorry, to come back, then can we commit to doing a scan of the Big 12 though, just to see where they stand and if they're, just for best practices and to see if there's any overlap there?
Yes, sir.
On that as well, through you, Chair, I was wondering, will we be you mentioned, so I believe that, you know, I have to say that you've taken accountability on this. You said, you know, that the buck stops with you as the chief and putting, I always say, we've identified the problem, but where are we going? Like, how are we going to fix it and how are we going to make sure it's not happening again? What work is being done? And you've laid out a good plan here, but you also alluded to the fact that there was hurt in the community, which really bothers you about that hurt in the community. And I'm wondering, when you're putting these policies together within the next 60 days, the next 3 board meetings, will there be consultation with the local communities, specifically the ones in general that were hurt by the decision to attend the stream?
That's a great question. And yes, Chair, through you, absolutely, that is my full intention. I've, you know, without naming names, I've reached out to many community members, all different community members that have been impacted. Some are very understanding and some are still very hurt. But I can tell you, since I've arrived and my administration knows, the organization knows where I stand and how I feel with community trust. That is a priority for me as chief of police. And you gain community trust every single day. You got to work at it. You could lose it, but you got to keep working at it every single day. My intention is to continue to build trust within this community. We have good people in this community, understanding people in this community, and we will continue to move forward and continue to work hard to gain the trust that we potentially lost.
Thank you. And my last question, Chair, if you'll indulge me, thank you. So first of all, the work that the ERU team does, I think is, I was on the road doing a ride along before I joined the Police Services Board, actually before you were chief, when we had 2 officers dropped on Gippsland. And I see firsthand, to your point, the dangers that can happen both to the public and to our frontline officers in uniform. And you know, it is an incredibly difficult job. And I don't think you can state enough how important that training is and how one split second can be not only dangerous to our officers, but very dangerous to the community and the people in the vicinity of these incidents. On the training opportunities, I want to drill down a bit more. I'm not an ERU expert, and You know, we're, as member Lehman has stated, we're a governance board, we're not an operations board, so excuse my ignorance on this, but what training opportunities are available? Like, are there courses all over Canada for ERU, or training competitions such as this within Canada, within the United States, all over Europe? Can you give me a bit of context on that, please?
So there's local training within the province annually that hasn't been done since COVID. And when we were looking at the training opportunities for our members, and I will go back to, you're right. Two of our members were shot before I got here. I came here in June, and then July, our officers were engaged once again with a very serious incident in the community. And unfortunately, our officers have used lethal force to protect the community. That all comes into decision-making. The only international competition that I was aware of at the time, well, one of them that came to light, was a SWAT competition in Florida. And that's later in the year. Now, the cost of that was going to be double the cost that we paid for Dubai. And the Dubai competition, to Councillor Lehman's point, that is considered like the elite of the elite competition. And that was the decision. That's ultimately why that decision was made. That's one of the reasons why we chose that competition. Financially, fiscally responsible. You know, it's not in the report. The number hasn't changed. Well, it's changed a little bit. I reported $15,700, the total cost for 11 members, which is incredible. But when they returned, cellular costs bring it up to a little over $17,000. So from a financial point, it made sense. Mind you, all of these decisions were made without knowing who was going to be there. And I'm not making any excuses about it, but it's highlighting the process that we need to put in place so we make sure we vet competitions and training opportunities like this again.
So thank you, Chief, and I think that just my closing comment would be that we have work to do to regain that trust, as you said, and I think that's very important because community trust has been it's been the foundation of everything you've talked about since you've been chief. So I look forward to seeing the report and a couple board meetings, and I think that as a board we'll continue to engage on this topic and do everything we can to support the administration in developing it and listen to the community as well. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Goss, Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you. So first of all, nobody has said that it was intentional to try to harm this community. That's not the issue at all. So I want to clarify that because we don't know what we don't know. We say that a lot, but it's the truth. And we are provided with opportunities every day to learn and to make sure that if we have made a mistake or if we have harmed somebody inadvertently, we will try to correct that. So it's interesting to me because there, of course, are a lot of people that go to Dubai. And in many circumstances, there would be accusations of human rights and, infractions there. But it's different really when somebody pays their own money to go and somebody is being paid by the City of London, for instance, to go. And I think that adds a little bit to the problem. I also want to say that, you said that you would, sort of next time maybe look inside North America, and I'm like, really, look at the human rights conditions for people in Florida right now. So I would not be supportive of that either, going to Florida. I think everywhere you go, there are going to be problems. And it's about mitigating the risks, right? And so I also want to say that we live in a community where there is a large population of Ukrainian residents. I think it used to be, maybe it still is, the largest in Canada, is that right? One of the largest in Canada. And I spent time in Ukraine because I worked there for a while, and I know what that community and that country has been through. And I know that a lot of people here were really ticked off, a lot of Ukrainians, because we didn't know. But we don't know what we don't know. And, you know, if we did know, we may not have gone. So it's important to understand that nobody said we're gonna go, even though we know what's going on. We just didn't know. And I know that training saves lives. And it doesn't just save lives of officers, although of course that's critical. It saves lives of our community members who are going to be protected by the officers that are doing the training. And I really feel that it, in some respects, was a no-win. Because, you know, had you not have sent the officers, there would have been a lost opportunity. Had you sent them to Florida, people would have been outraged because of what's going on in Florida, which is where the other event was being held, wasn't it? Isn't it Florida? But I think at the end of the day, for me, what really matters is not making decisions based on finances, but making decisions based on the best interests of our community. And so when we say, for instance, you know, that there were financial benefits to going there, I get that. But I always say human rights trump financial interests or financial costs, right? But again, you didn't know. None of us knew. We didn't know. And so I think we do live in a world where things are changing all over this world. We are at war. This world is at war, and that adds a different component, you know, to what we want to do. And I just want to reiterate that no harm was intended. Had we have known there were going to be Russians there or those sorts of things, would have probably been a different scenario, but we didn't know what we didn't know. And I just want to say that it has been a learning experience for this board, been a learning experience for the administration, for all of police services. And it's been a learning experience for those in our community who had no idea what was going outside of the perimeters of this community. So I just want to say that I know there are people here today because you're upset, and I get it. Of course you'd be upset, you know, especially if you come from a country where you had faced horrific acts of violence in the past or you've witnessed it. But I know our chief, and I know that what he says he means, and that you've always been honest and sincere about that. And from the moment this came down, you expressed concern about not knowing, but you also were grateful for the opportunity that was being provided to officers who could bring back that knowledge to help our community here. So I don't think it's a matter of saying, oh my God, I'm wrong, or having, you know, to keep being under attack by people because it's over and lots of lessons were learned. And I don't think this will ever happen again.
I have a couple of questions, but I'm following to the end. Are there any other questions from any member of the board? Okay, so I wrote down a series of questions for you, Chief. Many of them have already been addressed either via your report or via questions from my colleagues here. You asked me whether, my question to you, one of them was, is there a vetting process that's being developed internally or is it being developed externally? You've answered that in the sense that you'll be consulting with post-secondary institutions locally, potentially abroad. as well as Member Goss's question, which was, are we looking at other Big 12 police services to find out whether they have similar policies? You've undertaken to provide that. You provided an anticipated timeline. That was one of my questions, right? I don't want this to be lay in abeyance out there for months and months and months. I think you've told us in the next 2 to 3 months, you'll come back to the board with an update. You've answered that. You answered a question about, I have here, because in the report it said, what's a comprehensive review mean? Right. Nice catchphrase, but what's that mean? We've given answers in terms of what that entails. But here's the question that I have, and it's actually, you know what, it may be even more feedback for you as you engage in this process. With you and your members of your team as you go to develop the policy and bring it back to the board for consideration. It kind of flows from what Vice Chair Walker was talking about, and just even some of your comments illustrated what I think is a concern here. There's objective standards and there's subjective standards when it comes to human rights, right? And what I mean by that is sometimes there's very clear-cut cases of human rights violations, right? And I think what we had here was a pretty clear-cut case of not just human rights violations, but state actors that engaged in war crimes against the Ukrainian people, right? And so there's a difference between, I don't know if we should send our ERU unit to this country because they have a questionable human rights record. Truth be told, the vast majority of I'd be hard pressed to find a handful of countries that don't have a questionable human rights record, including this very country here that we call home. But in this instance, we had Chechen paramilitary individuals that are not just alleged to have committed human rights violations, but war crimes in Ukraine. And that's, I think, where the harm to the community here, to the Ukrainian Canadian community here, flows from that. It's not, we're not talking about a question about human rights record, or they've engaged in this, or is this kind of, we're talking about war crimes being committed against people. And I intentionally don't use past tense there, that are being committed against people as we speak. And I preface that by saying, I do not have a PhD in international relations. You don't have a PhD in international relations. I don't think anybody around this table has a PhD in international relations. You're the chief of police. Your primary job is to ensure the safety and security of Londoners in this city. I don't think there's a reasonable expectation that you, or any member of your team, or any member of this board would be able to look and be a comprehensive authority when it comes to geopolitical realities and geopolitical conflicts and factor that into your decision-making process. I believe, having had conversations with you and now speaking with you here at this board meeting, that, correct me if I'm wrong, when this opportunity presented itself, you looked at it through a series of different lenses. You looked at it through a financial lens. Did it make sense from a cost-benefit analysis to send the RE unit there? You looked at it from a training perspective. Was there value in terms of the training that the unit received by participating in this competition and training? You looked at it from a tactical perspective. You looked at it from a whole host of different perspectives, but I don't think you looked at it from a human perspective, and that's because although human rights forms an integral part of our core value at the London Police Service, this is kind of the crux of my point, which is once you know better, you do better. And one of the learning opportunities that's come from this experience is that, okay, I am now confident, based on your representations today, that we're putting structures in place to at least, if not eliminate, mitigate the degree to which that this will happen again in the future, right? But the problem I have is when we talk about standards, right? Are there objectives? And I want you to take this back to whoever you consult with externally. And when you come back, I may have some follow-up questions on that. When we talk about standards, right? What are we talking about? Vice Chair Walker talks about Florida, right? Or the United States. okay, well, that might be a case study for some people, and other people might take offense to the fact that, what are you talking about in the United States? That they're our ally, we share a border, it's our largest trading partner, right? There are easy ones. Like, if this was in North Korea, no one's gonna, right? If there was a training exercise in North Korea, right, and you thought, well, it's great return on our investment for money, I think we're gonna have a larger conversation, right? But there are other countries with whom we are allies with that have questionable human rights records. There are other countries with whom we have relations that are engaged in war crimes. There are other countries that are even part of NATO that we share diplomatic relations with that might garner some adverse response from community members who would say, why are we going to this country? So all of that as a suggestion to you, when you consult with the external PhDs and international geopolitical experts, I think we need to have a codified, clearly defined parameters in terms of to provide guidance to you and your team in terms of, because you're not political experts, you never will be, right? To provide you with at least a framework to say, okay, this is acceptable or this is not, because honestly, I think that there's a lot of countries that will generate some feedback, and adverse negative feedback. And to member Lehman's comment too, I want to clarify, we're a governance civilian oversight board, right? Truth be told, I don't want these decisions to come to the board, right, for decision-making or oversight. I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to policing. I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to international relations. I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to tactical ERU units. I'm not, right? But what I do want is I want a codified, clearly defined guidelines and parameters to help our police experts accurately gauge and assess whether the return on the investment, both from a financial, from a training, from a tactical, and from a human rights perspective, is worth it, right? And so I'm satisfied for now in terms of the report that's been provided. I qualify it. I'm very interested to see what will come back to the board in a few months' time. I reserve the right, like all of my colleagues, to ask follow-up questions at that point. But I do agree, and I want to be crystal clear. At no point, despite some of one of the things that were said in the community, despite some of the things that were represented in the media, the questions that were asked, at no point do I personally feel that we should be doing a moratorium on international training exercises. If you're telling me that the best of the best are training in certain countries, and if it satisfies those parameters once we define them, then you're damn right we should be sending our officers to go train with the best of the best. We came and City Council has passed the largest budget in the history of the City of London when it comes to police services, and it's hot, right? But you can put money and you can put resources, but if you don't have adequate training, and that's something that Inspector Scriven's presentation, Staff Sergeant Brown's presentation clearly illustrated to me, which is if you don't have proper training, right, then you can have all the money and all the resources in the world, you're not going to have that world-class service that Londoners not only expect to have, but deserve to have. So thank you for the report. I reserve the right to ask a number of questions when it comes back. I will ask a number of questions. I know my colleagues will, but for the time being, I appreciate your forthright candidness with regards to the report. So with that, I'm going to ask if anybody has any more questions, because
I do, Chair.
Oh, thank you. The voice from above, Mayor. That one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll presume you can hear me okay, and let me know if I cut out at all. So on the heels of some of those questions, I do have a question of the chief, and I appreciate what you said, Chair, about if there is a cost-effective international training, to not put it off the table. But I do want to ask the chief if, until the protocol comes back, is he suspending any sort of international training opportunities until we have that protocol in place?
Yes, Chair, and through you, yes, the answer is yes.
All right, so I appreciate that. I want to add just two pieces of context on the heels of what some of my colleagues said. First off, on the location, I think that there was some criticism of Dubai as a location. I'll just remind colleagues that the COP28 UN climate change conference in Dubai, which saw well over 100 heads of state and 85,000 participants, including the mayors, not myself, but mayors from Ontario, participate in that conference in that country. So, conferences and activities go around the world and they are hosted by many different nations. The location is the location. What I do appreciate in the report is the recognition that the key problematic piece here is the training alongside individuals and participation of individuals who are part of groups and part of activities that would be counter to our perspectives of fair and just activities, as well as general morals as in the way that we approach our activities with the work that we do. So I want to say I appreciate the recognition in the report that that when that came to the chief's attention, that's recognized as very problematic, and I think that that's where a majority of the concerns that I saw stem from. I want to say something else, Chief, and I'll say this through the chair to you personally. One of the challenges I had is I know and have been very supportive of our local Ukrainian community. And I mentioned to you when I was expressing my disappointment in that component of the activity, which again you did not know at the time, that I have a very close work colleague who is a refugee fleeing from Ukraine, and I appreciate that you asked if you could be introduced, and then after you spoke to that person, they told me that you, in a genuine and authentic way, apologized for any harm that person would have felt. And I think that shows you to be a truly authentic and genuine individual in what you said in your presentation and what Member Walker was getting to with harm being done and the way or others were saying about harm being done and the way you feel about that. So I do want to say publicly thank you, Chief, for your compassionate approach to those who may have felt harmed by the way that the circumstances evolved in this, and I think that speaks to your character very much. So I've been clear about my disappointment with the overall circumstances that we've ended up in this place. I always think whenever you get to that situation, you find the best possible path forward, and I think the board and the chief and the command team are carving out a protocol forward here that will avoid such things from happening in the future. And I very much appreciate his answer to that we would not engage in such activities until we have a very clearly defined protocol that would eliminate any risk of future things coming to fruition that were not known at the time, and making what could have appeared to be a reasonable decision into one that has exceptionally bad optics and circumstances and does unnecessary harm to our community. So I think, like many of my colleagues, I'll look to see what that protocol looks like. I appreciate the board's ability to make decisions on that. But those are my comments, Chair, for this on this matter for context. Thank you.
Chief Losberty.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan. And Chair, through you and Mayor Morgan, I was just informed that I'm stopping all international travel. However, we committed to one officer traveling to the UK at Cambridge University for evidence-based policing. So if the board is okay with that, I certainly don't want to stop that unless we're already committed there.
Oh, yeah. That's, yeah. Is anybody opposed?
No.
Jolly.
Thank you. I'll be back soon. That's where I'll be too.
Okay, can I get a motion that the board receives for informational purposes Chief Trump's report entitled International Special Weapons Tactics Competition, moved by Member Goss, second by Member Stevens, anyone opposed? Being none, that is carried. Thank you. Public correspondence, there's 6. It's in there. I believe, well, 6 copies of the same thing in there. So, motion takes, thank you, moved by member Sandstrom, second by member Doss. Nobody's opposed. I'm gonna dispense with the ARAP verbal update. I'll just do a double update next time. No, you don't. Yes, next time, right? Chair verbal, I'm just working through the next part of the agenda here. Chair verbal update, I'm just gonna give a much more in-depth, but I just want to say, and I'll say more next time, is I just want to say thank you to city council and to the mayor for passing the budget. It was an incredible investment. And the police board takes their responsibility very, very seriously to provide diligent oversight over what is. So stay tuned. We'll have more to talk about that in coming meetings over the next month. So administrator update, we're going to defer. LPA verbal update, we're going to defer. There was no business, new business. The next public board meeting is Thursday, April 18th. Somebody please bring a motion to adjourn. All right, thank you. Moved by member Goss, seconded by the member Stevenson. Nobody opposed. Thank you all.
We just want to talk to you.
Yeah.
We didn't get.
Are we going back?
I've been to you guys, it did. Right.